Chikwe. More than half of Nigeria's states have been hit by cholera. Hundreds of people have died. He said the disease had appeared while the authorities were concentrating on COVID.
The saddest aspect right now is we're dealing with a big cholera outbreak. That is not necessarily linked to COVID or any of the response, but the fact is we, as a society, have maybe not focused sufficiently over the last year on some of the chronic challenges that we have.
Votes are being counted in Zambia after tightly contested presidential and general elections. The Electoral Commission said full results should be known by Sunday. President Edgar Lungu is seeking a second term. He's facing a strong challenge from the main opposition candidate, Hakainde Hichilema, against the background of a flagging economy. World news from the BBC. The head of the South Korean conglomerate Samsung has been freed early from jail, a release the country's president said was in the national interest. Lee Jae-yong walked free after serving about half of a 30-month prison sentence for corruption. The president, Moon Jae-in, said his release would help the economy, which has suffered during the coronavirus pandemic. Israel has begun giving people aged 50 and over a third coronavirus vaccination as it struggles to contain the Delta variant of the disease. This is an expansion of a pioneering booster jab program. The World Health Organization has urged developed countries to promote the distribution of vaccines globally rather than administer booster shots. The remains of a Jordanian soldier still holding his rifle in his hand have been unearthed in Jerusalem. The man is believed to have been killed in a battle more than 50 years ago. Alan Johnston reports.
These skeletal remains were discovered during construction work in what's called the Ammunition Hill area of occupied East Jerusalem. Along with the rifle still held in the soldier's hand, there was a bayonet in his belt and bullets and grenades nearby. It's most likely that the man was killed while defending his post during one of the fiercest battles of the Six-Day War in 1967. Israeli paratroopers stormed and captured a military position on Ammunition Hill, killing more than 70 Jordanian soldiers.
Alan Johnston. New Zealand's government says it's disappointed by Amazon's decision to move production of its Lord of the Rings television series to Britain. Amazon has already spent more than $460 million filming its first season in New Zealand. Future episodes will be shot in the UK. And those are the latest stories from BBC News.
天天在一起，天天用心听，听见台北的声音。FM 93.1，幸福永远属于你。
公民总主笔，
方恩格时间。
谁当家？
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 你当家？
谁当家？谁当家？
谁当家？
谁当家？我当家。你当家？我当家。
我当家。
到底谁当家？你来当家。
Taipei Broadcasting Station. Our guest today is tech entrepreneur Victor Cho. Victor, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Victor, you're the founder of Square, and we're going to talk more about what Square does and your career in traditional industries as well as tech industries. We'll talk a little bit about COVID-19 and how that impacts all of that stuff too. But before we get to all that, tell us a bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up?
Sure. Born in Taipei. Emigrated with the family to the U.S. when I was about 3. Grew up on the East Coast. I tend to say New York, but the truth is I grew up in Connecticut, which is about an hour away from New York City.
You know, for people who are not from New York, it kind of reminds me of like the football Jets and Giants, which play in New Jersey, but they're called the New York Jets and Giants.
That's right. That's right. I
mean, so if you're within an hour, even in Connecticut, you could say New York. Right?
That's right. Like we used to call it the tri-state area of Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey.
Yep.
So I grew up in Connecticut, suburbs. Went to school at Boston University. was a finance, international management, and general management major, on track to wear my Brooks Brothers suits, and working 100-hour weeks on Wall Street, which
Sounds
I did.
Like fun.
It was definitely something, but I wouldn't say fun. But it was really worth going to do that for sure for a few years.
You know, a lot of people who grow up in that tri-state area, because I also come from that area, they go to university nearby. But a lot of people also want to get far away. I chose like the mid-path. I was close to New York City, where I went to university, but it was in Pennsylvania. It was in the countryside. So it was still like going to a different world. Why did you stay close by? Why did you decide to go to Boston, which was close to where you grew up in Connecticut?
Boston is a great college town, and it's one of those things that, it was such a great experience going to that school and mixing with all these other students, not just from Boston University, but from the neighboring colleges and such like that. So I wouldn't give it up at all.
Yeah. I love how you diplomatically, you didn't mention that other university next to the river. It starts with an H.
That's right. The dream school that my parents wanted me to go to. Yeah. But I would say this: I was very clear that when I graduated, I actually had job offers to stay in Boston, and Boston's a big banking town.
Sure.
But I chose to take the offers in New York City.
Other than being a great college town, and my sister went to school at Brandeis, so that's another
great management school.
Yeah, and it's not even downtown, but again, they think of it as being in Boston, right?
That's right.
What else did you like about Boston? Did you like the food, or did you like the sports scene? What was it about Boston that was really special for you?
Well, I actually lived like a 2-minute walk from where the Boston Red Sox played. So, and I got to go see Boston Celtics games all the time. I'm a big sports guy, so that was pretty cool. I got to see the other side because since I'm closer to New York, I'm more of a New York fan of sorts, but I did really appreciate, seeing the other side of the teams and enjoying that part. I also think there's this kind of very interesting culture and education out of Boston, right? It's very academic in some ways. So definitely, I had a great time in school.
And for people who haven't been to Boston, there's actually there's a Chinatown, like
There
a lot
is.
of American cities, and there's also a Taiwanese community, not necessarily more recent migrants as well, not necessarily older Chinese migrants there as well. There's also a big Taiwanese community.
That's right. I think, interestingly enough, there's different time periods. There's different types of people who emigrate, but they always target big cities originally. So whether it be starting, decades ago with, like, let's say my family going to the bigger cities, and now even people from mainland China just going into the Bostons and New Yorks of the world, that has always been something that people tend to target when they emigrate over there.
Now, you said you went into finance for a while, in the 100-hour work week kind of jobs. I mean, was that your dream growing up? Like, I want to sit at a desk, type on the computer, trade something, or just make a lot of money and work long hours, kind of like Wall Street movie kind of guy.
Superficially, yeah. I'll be very frank, right? My family, when they emigrated over, my parents were both accountants, but at the time, probably the opportunities did not show up in the case that probably we would have these days, right? Especially as immigrants in that kind of era. But they opened up restaurants. So I was in that environment growing up, and as a 10-year-old busboy, washing dishes, becoming a waiter, acting as a junior accountant with my mom, the aunties. I did a lot of this stuff, and I love that. That's how we earned our first few buckets of gold, and how the communities embraced us because we made great food for these guys, and we got to sort of show them a little bit of our culture, right? At the same time, I am not the guy to take over the family business. My father is a very successful restaurateur. He opened up about 40 restaurants in the U.S. at the end of the day. And I don't begrudge any of my friends who took over their family businesses, because there's plenty of them. And I think it's a very tough job to do. I tend to like being known as Victor and whether you yell at me or curse at me or praise me, I'm just Victor. I'm not so-and-so's son. And I realized pretty early on in the game that if I was to jump into the family business and help continue to manage and do these different things, at best, if things continue to succeed, it's because I'm so-and-so's son. At worst, Victor screwed everything up because he's so-and-so's son. So I very early on never really wanted that life, and that's no disrespect. My dad casts a very large shadow in these kind of ways, so I wanted to forge a path for myself.
Well, hopefully we'll save this recording and you'll play it for your kids 20 years from now.
When I demand that they take over the family business. And
exactly. You also, even though you studied university in the U.S., you got a graduate degree here in Taiwan.
Yeah.
What was that like, getting a MBA in Taiwan, having basically grown up in the U.S. and done your undergrad? And the academic environment is different, and you also had significant working experience by the time you went and got the MBA.
Yes, I did. Again, because I got to do things that I wanted to do versus the traditional path of staying at one or two companies for, I don't know, until I retired. I was in Taiwan at the time, and there was a choice to make, and I could have done my MBA back in the US or maybe in other parts of Asia, but I was very happy to stay in Taiwan and go get my MBA from Zhengda. And I got to meet a lot of great local people here. I got to even strengthen my network further here in Taiwan. And I wouldn't necessarily say that Accounting 101 a second or fourth time was something I needed, but to be frank, there's a lot of great courses there, and I got to enjoy a lot, and I did actually learn a lot there.
We'll talk more about your experience in the tech industry later in the show, but when you were getting the MBA in Taiwan, and given how important the tech industry is, traditionally more on the hardware side, but increasingly more B2C side here in Taiwan, are the professors attuned to that at an MBA program in Taiwan? Are they up to date with the times and the movement to B2C platforms and the role that technology provides in customer engagement, or are they still a little bit behind?
I think the honest answer is it depends, and I don't fault them. Some people have areas of expertise in whatever it may be. At the same time, I've had professors who are very knowledgeable in startups and entrepreneurship, and for example, one of my professors who has been very kind to me throughout my journey, named Chester Ho, He Xiaotai. He's actually a pretty famous entrepreneur out of Taiwan himself. He knows a lot of the ins and outs of, let's say, not just Taiwan, but the U.S., Asia, and I got to pick up a lot from them as well.
You mentioned your experience with the family business, and you didn't want to go down that path, but you did have significant experience in traditional industries, finance. You spent some time in education here in Taiwan, which is a big industry, automotive, advertising, and now you're in tech. What concepts or knowledge can you still bring from traditional industry jobs over to the tech field?
It's interesting, right? So if you looked at my resume, it's probably very atypical in the sense that, yeah, you were right. I got to work in a lot of different industries. I got to learn from a lot of great mentors and a lot of great managers. And what I take away from that is this. You have to be able to have great ideas, and you have to be able to execute. And I don't care how smart you are or how hardworking you are, you have to be passionate about what you're doing, and you have to get the team that is also passionate about what you want to do. And that's my takeaway from all these different things. And of course, I was a marketing head at Volkswagen. I learned a lot about marketing. I was also let's say a business development and strategy head as well. And I got to do a lot of different things in each part, whether it be, soft skills or even hard skill sets. I get to put together when you become, let's say, the boss of your own company, and utilize that to understand what each part sort of works out to. So how does your marketing impact your business development and vice versa? How does your operation and also impact that as well, and how they all intertwine with one another with back office and accounting? So for me, I got to play in a lot of playgrounds, and I got to learn a lot of different industries, and I'm very happy that I did get to do that, because I would say that I'm a jack of all trades in some ways, and the opposite side of that is I'm a master of none, I suppose. But I am a very well-versed person when it comes to business and commercial, and I do know how all those pieces intertwine with one another. So,
and is there one thing from all those experiences that you said to yourself, when I'm the boss, I am not going to do it that way?
I think very rarely do I have this kind of methodology when it comes to this kind of stuff. But what I do realize, and maybe this is not just Taiwan, but in general, because of my American background, I'm very much a communicator and a straight shooter. So I do like to let people know when they're doing well. Conversely, I do like to let people know when they're not doing well and have to actually give them warnings. And I don't pussyfoot around that. I am very direct when it comes to this, and I expect them to work on the issues at hand, or we have to figure something out. So this is something that I realized that not just fits me, but also from other mentors or bosses that I've seen that works for me. I'm not one to play political games and pussyfoot and try different things here and there. I'm very much more of a direct guy. When I say you did a great job, I don't mean anything else than you did a great job. And conversely, when you don't do a great job, I let you know you are not doing a good job. What's up? Is there something you need help with? Can I help you or the team help you? And try to figure it out. And maybe there's nothing we can do or I can do to help, but at least my concerns or my feelings or my thoughts on them and on the business are at least out in the open.
Not something you often see in big Taiwan companies, but as you said, maybe it's your American influence.
Could be.
You were at Food Panda.
I was.
In its early years, kind of entering the Taiwan market.
That's right.
What are some of the challenges that they had when they came to Taiwan?
Well, it's very, very funny, right? So years ago, when I was running Food Panda Taiwan and then eventually Asia, there were people just didn't know you. And you're telling them, hey, I'm a platform, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a percentage of your orders, and I'm going to deliver food for you. And besides the McDonald's, Pizza Hut, and Domino's of the world, and the Biendang Laobans of the world, people don't do that. So it was a very tough push. It was a very difficult negotiation with each and every restaurant that you can imagine, because they've never heard of it before. And then on top of that, well, what value are you bringing? I bring the brand, I bring the food. Who are you? What are you doing? You're just some random company that sprouted out of the ground. I don't care where you're from. And it's just educating the population. And what's very interesting now is, of course, the shoe is sort of on the other foot. With food delivery, it's now a part of everyone's life. There is, from my mother, who's 70, to my daughter, who's 7, they all very much understand how to use the apps, understand what they want to eat and how to order and when to order from which app. They're very savvy here. And even, that's something that's very different. And it took 8 or 10 years to get there.
Sometimes, though, with these things, at least in my experience in Taipei and Taiwan, the rollout seems slower than in other locations around Asia. And even though if the consumers understand it and the consumers want it, the other people in the ecosystem, whether it's regulators, in the case of Food Panda, restaurants, in the case of transportation, it could be the traditional taxi companies,
sure,
the payment processors, the banks. There seems to be some hurdles.
That's right.
To implementation. Well, why does it take a little longer in Taiwan for some of these things?
I think there's just a lot of things that are built in to, let's say, a country. And a lot of times from laws or legality purposes, they're built for a specific reason. And maybe at that point in time when it was created or instituted, they didn't have these different ideas to really bounce around. So it's sort of tough to keep up with the times with laws that sometimes are a bit outdated. And you mentioned a lot of different things. I'll give you a perfect example. When I was running Food Panda, all of our riders were our employees. And that's because I didn't want to deal with the process that, let's say, Uber made famous of these, contract workers, because there was no laws governing that. And that was something that was very interesting when, let's say, Uber and Uber Eats came in with this kind of methodology that, you can't govern. It's impossible to govern in some ways. And, and I went the safe route. Yes, everyone's my employee. I'm paying their jianbao, their laobao, all this stuff, and this is what's going on. And I was never bothered by the government. As a matter of fact, I was very supported by the government. At the same time, after I left, I do know for a fact that they do have a portion of people now at Food Panda who are just not employees per se, and they're just they work in the same way. And now this is something that becomes, I guess, more normal, or the new normal. So it's not like any government people are coming down on these companies as well. I think it just takes some time to understand and sort of, get everyone on the same page.
Is there some experiences from Food Panda, memories that you have? Like, did somebody try ordering like 1,000 beer dogs or something? Or was there a typhoon day when things went really crazy? What kind of really interesting things happened?
Early on, since you mentioned typhoon, there's this when it rains, people don't want to go out, and there's one of those situations where it was a typhoon day, but not officially. It was raining like crazy. Everyone's like, nobody wanted to do deliveries. Like it was absolutely nuts. And what we did was, we closed the delivery distance a little bit to, let's say, the key areas of Taipei City. And what we did was, we actually got cabs for all the riders. And the riders, we just paid the cabs, let's say 2,000 NT for the day, and say, okay, you're just driving this guy around, and he's just going to be making delivery orders, and that's his job. And we did that. And I think the idea really was, there's still people that want to eat food. How do we help them out? There's still restaurants that want to serve these people. So how do we act in the interim here? Probably not the smartest way to do things, but those were the real early days when it was, the wild, wild west, and we're just coming up with crazy ideas, and we're like, oh yeah, let's just call up the biggest taxi company, tell them to give us 50 cabs, and we'll just do it.
Did they think you were crazy when you made that phone call?
I guess the cabbies were loving it, because that's a very nice payday for them. As I recall, they closed. It was actually a typhoon day by, let's say, 1 o'clock p.m. So actually that game was over at that point, because the minute, let's say, the government says it is an official typhoon day, then I thought, then it becomes some safety issues.
Sure.
So.
Sure. I think most users have positive experiences with these platforms. That's why they're able to stay in business. But customer complaints are inevitable. So share some entertaining complaints. What are some of the more odd phone calls or written complaints that a platform like that gets from customers?
I've gotten complaints where someone would say this food is horrible. Like it tastes horrible, it's, and they would take a picture and send it in, and they said, yeah, after and it's an empty bowl. And what I'm trying to say is, they finished all of the food, then they said this food was garbage, and I hate it, please refund my money to me, after destroying the entire order. And it may not just be one thing. It was like whatever's in that order, they ate everything, and then they're like, it was horrible. So, I'm a pretty reasonable guy, but when those kind of emails come in, sometimes you're just like, all right, is it, you play it by the numbers, you just reimburse them, or you give them a voucher for next time, or do you really just put your foot down and say, hey, let's be reasonable here? And I've done both. To be honest with you.
But as the senior management, did you get involved at such a micro level with dealing with things like that?
Early on, yes. So I think I have this weird thing, and I guess I get it from my dad, where I like to be involved with everything so I know what's going on, and then I can sort of pull myself out. So at least when the head of customer service talks to me, I'm not lost. at least when the head of BD is chatting with me about problems that they're facing, I potentially could give some sort of direction and solution. So yeah, depending on certain situations, I am plugged in like to that kind of micro management perspective.
I'm going to ask you a tough question then. So
Yeah.
along those lines, did you get on a scooter with the
Of course.
basket and,
Yeah.
and order food yourself?
For sure.
Or sorry, deliver food.
No, for sure. And I think that's not a ridiculous question. That's something that everyone should do. And at my companies, everyone should do it, and they would do it at least for half a day or a couple orders or something like that, because you have to understand the other side of the business. You have to understand, let's say if you're doing groceries, if you're a picker, how do you pick groceries? If you're a food delivery guy, how do you go to a restaurant and say, hi, my name is Victor, I'm here to pick up order 1, 2, 3, 4, and then deliver it to somebody else? And there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's no 100% correct way, but you have to experience it to really get it.
So you had all your senior staff go out and get on the scooter and deliver food?
I don't care about senior staff. Everyone's doing it. Everyone has to do it. I've done it. And I think when I do it, there's really no reason or rationale my senior team would say, oh, 不好意思, I cannot. I've even had situations where a senior staff member said, Victor, I don't know how to ride a scooter. And I said, all right, so-and-so, please give him a lift. Be his chauffeur, and then you just have to, as a big burly man, sit on the back of a scooter with another dude.
Hopefully that was on a hot, rainy day like right now.
Yeah, exactly. You have to go experience it. Is the key point of it all.
Okay, we're going to take a break, but when we come back, we'll talk some more about your experiences with platform services that deliver food, and we'll talk about 3 Square.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Okay, we're listening to Residence Messenger on Taipei Broadcasting Station.
如有长照服务需求、长照特别扣除额问题，请拨打1966长照专线，5分钟内通话免付费。一通电话让长期照顾管理专员协助申请长期照顾服务及解答长期照顾特别扣除额相关问题。以上内容由台北市政府卫生局提供。
爸爸应酬不开车，黄色嘟嘟安全多。应酬喝酒不过量，安全回家最上道。爸爸要平安回家哦。
喝酒不开车，开车不喝酒哦。让我们一起尊重生命，拥抱亲情。
亲爱的民众，提醒您定期清除排油烟机内部油垢。烹煮食物时，切忌分心做其他事情，并注意人离火熄。且厨房附近应设置灭火器，操作时保持适当距离。当厨房火灾时，严禁以水灭火。油锅起火也千万不要移动油锅，以免翻覆造成火势扩大延烧。以上内容由台北市政府消防局提供。
亲爱的朋友，您还在吸烟吗？快拿着健保卡到戒烟门诊或拨打戒烟专线0800636363。提醒您，最近兴起的电子烟、加热烟，因为没有浓浓的烟臭味，就被认为无害。其实已经证实，新兴烟品都有二手烟及三手烟的危害，甚至还有爆炸的风险。我是义工蔡依林，所有烟品都 get out。我拒烟，我骄傲。
家己电台吼，家己主持咧。大家好，我是郭文铁，我伫台北广播电台。
谁当家？
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 你当家？
谁当家？
谁当家？谁当家？
当家？我当家？你当家？我当家？到底谁当家？你来当家。
Welcome back to Residence Messenger. Our guest today is Victor Cho, the founder of 3 Square, a cloud kitchen platform. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But just before the break, you mentioned groceries in when we were discussing platforms. You also worked for another company that delivered groceries off of a food platform, an online app to order groceries. We think of ordering or buying groceries as something you go to the supermarket for, you go to the traditional, the wet market for. What was that like, trying to roll that out in Taipei?
Yeah, that was an adventure. That was actually amazing. And what's really cool about it is this, right? You learn a lot. I think at the end of the day, everything you do, you got to learn something. And what I learned is there are some amazing people out there. And what I would say is, a drink, a soda or whatever, it doesn't matter who picks it. But when you're looking at wet markets, the person that you hire to pick the ripe tomatoes versus the unripe tomatoes, what types of beef and stuff like that is very important. And we had some really cool people. We had the first group of people that I worked with, those pickers. They would have our app, and like when the orders come in, they would start picking different things, and they're very cool. They would tell. Some of them were like aunties. They know how to cook, and they would say, "Oh, what do you?" They'd look at the list, and they know exactly what you're going to make for dinner, and they'd say, "I would recommend you change this out for that because this looks very fresh and it's very cheap." And it's pretty interesting. Like
interesting, but did that slow down the speed, for lack of a better word, that you might be looking for?
And that doesn't happen every time, but I would say because the app was set up so you can text message the person who placed the order, they would respond and be like, "Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, let's do it that way. I'm not going to do the tomato and beef thing today. Maybe I'll go with beef and broccoli today." So yeah, there's a lot of fun things that I was able to see firsthand. And then even more importantly, got to work with some big supermarkets. And
so they didn't mind that these buyers were walking around the store on behalf of another customer? No. I think at the end of the day, they looked at it as, especially for
big supermarkets that did not have this delivery service, they looked at it as an additional service for their customers. And our guys, they're super helpful. I think our grocery partners, they were willing to put up additional funds and resources for marketing, for PR, and I'm very grateful. And
one of the surprising things about that industry, from what I read, is the customer, I guess, complaint or negative feedback is surprisingly low. Like, they're generally happy with the tomatoes or the other. Like, how do you measure that, or like, how do you just make sure that people know what a good tomato is before they get the job?
I think it's it's pretty interesting, right? So like there's a lot of SOP, and you have to come up with a SOP in a guidebook or a playbook, and you got to constantly update and iterate these playbooks. And what's very interesting is when you're in a supermarket or in a wet market all day, every day, you all of a sudden develop a green thumb. You start knowing where things are. You start understanding prices. You start understanding if this tomato looks good today versus not. And it's a pretty quick upkeep. And we actually did hire a lot of aunties initially, so they know this stuff better than I do. I have to be honest, I don't cook for my family every day, but I'm sure they do when they get off a shift, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're in their own kitchen and they know exactly what they want to do. And I'm sure they brought that knowledge to not just the end consumer, but to us as well.
You just used the magic words, knowing what you want to do. And about a little over a year ago, you knew what you wanted to do. You wanted to start your own company, 3 Square. Tell us about the path to starting your own company and why at that time was the right time.
So I had a couple things brewing, right? And I'm young enough where I still need to work. And do I go work for someone else, or do I start my own thing? And I looked at a lot of different opportunities, not just in Taiwan, but across Asia. And some were very good. I have to admit, the pay was very good. There would be some great coworkers that I got to meet and work with again. But at the end of the day, this idea, this 3 Square idea that I wanted to do really, really grabbed a hold of me, enough so that I decided around Chinese New Year last year, where I would put together a deck, I would do the P&L analysis, I would print a business card or two, and see what's up, and really just starts talking to different investors and family offices. And I gave myself some milestones, and if I hit those milestones, I'm all in.
Now, for those in the audience who still might be unfamiliar with the concept, explain it to us. And also, do you prefer ghost kitchen, cloud kitchen, or some other terminology for it?
Sure. So they call it, in English, they call it ghost kitchen, cloud kitchen, shadow kitchen, virtual kitchen. I personally don't care. But what I refer to my company as is a Cloud Kitchen 2.0. And that's because it takes several different business models within cloud kitchens and it puts it together. So for example, there is a digital food hall network that I have, and if you could imagine a food court or a food hall that is virtual in the sense that it is in the clouds, it is on the platforms and stuff like that, and that's one part of the business. I have these kitchens that I rent out to great restaurants that want to make great food for great people, and I help them do that with my expertise and my team's experience. And I'm not going to tell them how to make great food because they know that, but I can help them pick locations, go onto those platforms, optimize their menus for delivery, help create new items or new brands within their kitchen. And this is something that we do. At the same time, I also have created my own virtual brand group. So I have our own brands, and we're able to not just generate revenue from our brands, but also I'm franchising those brands to existing restaurants. So what that means is this: if you own a restaurant, you will know that you are not 100% full capacity all day, every day. And what I can do is give you a brand or 2 or 6 that allows you to optimize your kitchen, your existing kitchen, your existing chefs and headcount costs, your existing, electricity bill. I'm just giving you more stuff to sell. I'm connecting to you quickly with the platforms to deliver. And now all of a sudden you may make 20% to 50% more. And what I really want to do is just give different services to restaurants depending on what they want. And ultimately, I want restaurants to not just survive, but thrive. And that's my way of sort of giving back to them while, not altruistically also making some money as well.
What was the reaction from investors when you mentioned you put together the deck? This was in 2020. There was the COVID issues. There's competitors. What was the feedback from investors when you started to talk to them?
So I think I will say I'm very lucky. I'm very blessed. I did raise my initial round very quickly with some very prominent family offices in Taiwan and also outside of Taiwan. It really helped that my team and I have the background that we have, which is in food delivery and food tech. I have family business of restauranting. I also my team, half of them also have restaurants. They're invested or the family does it as well. And we're very clear with what we want to do. And I think people appreciate that. Now, it's not just an idea on a napkin. It's literally, this is what I plan to do. This is what month it's going to happen. And this is my expected revenues. And this is what I want to do in year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. Now, I think the general investor wouldn't say, oh, I really believe, Victor, that you will do exactly what you say on year 5. But what they want you to do is at least think about it. And I think they appreciated, or at least the people who did invest do appreciate the kind of thoroughness and that we did have.
You mentioned advising restaurants on maybe utilizing some underutilized capacity that they could put to use maybe with a different brand and then offer out the products through the platforms. But in the shadow kitchen, give us a profile of an entrepreneur, or maybe they're an existing restaurant, who takes space in the shadow kitchen to sell on a platform.
So if I could adjust your question just a little bit, who takes a space in a 3 Square shadow kitchen is slightly different. But so yeah, basically, I mean, because of our experience, we know thousands of restaurants. We know their profile. We know how they do. We know, their performance, their average basket size, etc. We know if the boss is even, a good boss to work with as a restaurant partner or not. And what we do is take this data and map it out and see what we assume their numbers would be in where we are. And we talk to these different restaurants and we break it down by tier. These are the ones we want. Then, of course, if you go through and everyone says no, then you go through that next tier and so on and so forth. But we're very lucky that, we're able to target these groups and we have a very clear methodology of what we're doing. We're able to reduce their risk and potentially allow them to grow their business in a lot of different ways. So, I mean, a perfect example is we target 2 types of restaurants. One I would call a local hero. So if I mentioned the name, you would know the restaurant. The average person would know it. The second one is called a hidden gem. A hidden gem is a restaurant that if I may mention, you may not know. But where they are located in that district, they are tops. And we target these 2 types of restaurants to work with us.
So is it for entrepreneurs as well, or it's more for established restaurateurs?
So I'll be very frank to say that starting off, it's more for established entrepreneurs who want to open up that next location. As we grow and expand, I also want to give back a little bit more to those newly startup guys and save a kitchen or 2 for those entrepreneurs who are just starting out and want a cheap and easy way to, test out their ideas.
Is there a type of cuisine that works best with this concept?
So there's a lot of cuisines that do well. So, but you have to remember a couple things. First, we're in Taipei. So what is the Taipei palate? What cuisines do well in Taipei in general? So my joke is always this. I'm never going to create a salad brand because Taiwanese people don't like salads. They don't like cold salads the way, let's say, we do. And it's just not something that sells by itself very well. But there are certain cuisines that do great. For example, bento box or biendang. that is something that does well. And you could go premium, you could go luxurious, you can go average price or even sub-average price, and they have a market for everyone. So when you know this data and you understand that, then you start targeting different groups and different cuisines. And that doesn't mean like all my restaurants just do bentos, by the way. It just means that that is a great example of what you have to understand when you target these different restaurants. And every cuisine type has that champion, whether it be Indian food or Japanese food or bento box. And you go after those guys and talk to them and see what their thoughts are.
What about for desserts or breakfast? I mean, does everything work, or are we still, like you said, a bento box? That's a good example of something that works well. Are we really just looking at hot meals as opposed to other types of foods?
So I think it really depends, right? So if you notice, traditional breakfast places, they used to not open past breakfast, but now they open to 1 o'clock and they offer lunch type stuff. And these guys are playing the game right. If your rent is the same, no matter if you are open for 6 hours or 24, what can you put in your kitchen that allows you to really maximize that space? And that's the idea that we in 3 Square that we're trying to push and try to educate and share with restaurants. And back to your question, I think restaurant brands do well, but it's underutilizing their real estate. Drink brands do decent, but there's always those champion or top 5 drink brands on the delivery platforms that do really well. But it just depends.
You mentioned education. What about for regulators? We talked about them earlier in the context of a food panda. But for Cloud Kitchen or Ghost Kitchen 2.0, what kind of education is involved with regulators?
So I think, for me personally, I use the word Cloud Kitchen, Ghost Kitchen sort of as an adjective. I also use, Digital Food Hall Network, which, it's something I literally made up. And it's just something that's catching on now as far as when you break it down what that actually means. But ultimately, we're just in the service business. We're restaurants. All of the different, laws that pertain to restaurants, large and small, we follow. And I think that's the key point. I'm not trying to really, stir the boat or shake it up so much where I'm saying I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. I think the laws and regulations of Taiwan are there. There are some things that need tweaking. But at least for me personally, I'm able to operate my business within the confines of those laws.
And what about operating within the confines of COVID-19 restrictions?
Well, look, I think our business is built for that. I have, again, Cloud Kitchens don't have a dine-in area. My actual restaurant, my actual places, they have a small dine-in area. It's very, very small, and it's there for convenience early. It's 10 seats, 15 seats. And the point is this: I'm maximizing my space with those kitchens to make money, with those brands to make money. For the average restaurant, those dine-in spaces, that could be 50, 60, 65% of your overall real estate area, that's now dead. That generates $0. So for our business, to be quite frank, we're doing very well during COVID. Without COVID, we would still be doing very well.
And where can restaurants go if they want to learn more information about 3 Square?
They can just Google 3 Square, or they could search 3 Square online, and go on Facebook and search as well. We're on Instagram as well, and just type in 3 space the word square or 三食柜. And you can find us.
Okay. And when we have this conversation in the future, as a final question, a year or 5 years from now, about this industry in Taipei, what are we going to be talking about?
In Taipei, I in let's say 3 to 5 years, I don't see a reason why I don't have 20 locations. Each location having 20 brands, so that's 400 brands operating in the greater Taipei area with this kind of business model.
Terrific. Well, Victor, this has been a great conversation, learning about what 3 Square does and building these platforms in Taipei. Thank you for coming on the show.
No, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to Residence Messenger on Taipei Broadcasting Station. Have a